Hi, this is Ramos Reviews, the channel where I quickly express my thoughts and opinions about all types of movies. Today, I'll be ranking the 14 Friday the 13th movies, the 12 movies that were produced by Paramount or New Line Cinema, and the 2 fan films that were directed by Vincent DeSanti. I've gotta say, I understand how important and iconic this franchise is to the horror genre, but honestly, I can't say that I love, like, or let alone enjoy the Friday franchise as a whole. Many of the movies are just a copy and paste of the previous ones. Very rarely do we ever get changes made in the Friday franchise, which personally makes many of these movies a miserable watch. It's easily the biggest weakness of the franchise, although the ones that are good I find to be great, while the ones that aren't are average or just all around bad. And to be honest, something I do take pride in is how little of an effect people's opinions have to change mine. I'm usually able to stay neutral when watching a movie, and if looking at other people's rankings taught me anything, it's that once again I succeeded in doing so. So just like my rating system, I base my rankings on things like how well it's made, like special effects, directing, acting, how good it's written, like the story, characters, and creativity, and how entertaining and enjoyable I found the movie to be overall. If you agree with me, that's great, and if you don't, that's fine. Everyone is open to an opinion, and these are just mine. Now, let's get to the rankings. At the bottom of the franchise is easily Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Even with Tina being a Carrie ripoff, this movie still feels like a typical Friday the 13th movie. And look, I understand with the addition of Tina's powers, they still had to make this movie feel like a Friday the 13th movie, but unfortunately their method of doing so was to give us mostly forgettable characters. Though Tina is great and possibly the only good thing about this movie. She's an innocent, vulnerable person who just wants to live her life and get over her past trauma, which helps you really care for her, even more with the good acting and overall performance from Laura Lincoln. However, many of her scenes are dialogue based, but due to her being shy most of the time, she's ultimately outshined by the other characters, who I said before are boring and forgettable. So that says something. Jason also looks pretty cool and scary due to his visibly decaying body. Not to mention him being played by Kane Hodder this time around. His willingness to be a stuntman is shown front and center. Plus Tina and her telekinetic abilities actually give Jason a run for his money in a way that doesn't look dumb or take away from Jason's threatening presence. But as I said before, the majority of the characters make this movie pretty boring. Plus it also manages to have the absolute dumbest ending of the franchise. And with the exception of the sleeping bag tree slam, the kills aren't as gory or clever as the ones in the rest of the movies. Overall, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood is a movie filled with mostly unlikable characters and boring scenes that at its best is a 5 out of 10. Due to many of these movies being similar both in stories and as overall movies, these next 4 movies are basically equal to me as they're all 6 out of 10s, and depending on the day or mood, I could see myself switching them around. Still, as of right now, my number 13th spot is going to be Friday the 13th Part 3. Look, I get that this is a movie where Jason gets his iconic hockey mask and overall definitive look. Other than that, this movie isn't anything special to me. To me, creativity and originality can help boost a movie tremendously, even if it's not executed correctly. But unfortunately, the riskiest and most creative thing about this movie is the number of times they use and find ways to use their gratuitous 3D gimmick shots. It's so overused and evident that's all the director and crew care for. They didn't even try to have an interesting story or unique characters. Even the final girl is forgettable. The only characters who actually made an impression were the 3 bikers, Shelly, and Vera, who by the way I feel like was definitely more of final girl material, especially compared to the basic final girl the writers forcefully wrote for us. Honestly, the only reason we would care for her was the fact that she's a potential rape victim. And look, I understand that rape is a terrible thing that no one should ever have to go through, but to make us care about her not through her personality, but instead purely because of her past trauma is just so lazy and personally just doesn't work. We also get Shelly, an annoying, self-loathing, attention-seeking dick. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't feel bad for him whatsoever. If you watch this movie, you understand the hate I have for this character.
You be yourself if you look like this.
I can say though that we do get some better gore and a few moments of entertaining dialogue. Plus, Jason gets a scarier upgrade due to him getting his iconic mask, and also the good amount of times where he has it off. However, I don't like the idea of Jason being a potential rapist. He's already bad enough as a killer. Lastly, the entire final act is filled with many dumb and weird plot important decisions. Friday the 13th Part 3 as a whole is just a complete unoriginal mess of a movie that has only 5 memorable characters, with only one of them being likable, making this feel like a poorly done ripoff of the previous films. Unlike The New Blood, where they purposefully decide to be unoriginal and have even less memorable characters. Barely beating Part 3 at the moment is my number 12 choice, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. Now, credit where it's due, the side characters are the most creative and unique set of people in the entire franchise. Though, like I said, the side characters, not the protagonists. The final girl Pam is nice, but still forgettable, just like her love interest and other roommates. However, my least favorite protagonist is unfortunately Tommy Jarvis. After being so great in the 4th movie, Tommy being mostly mute and traumatized makes him suck to have to watch. It's just hard to care about someone so lifeless and anxious all the time, though he does get to beat the shit out of Ethel's annoying son Jr. Even worse than the forgettable main characters, the movie isn't well written or directed whatsoever, due to the movie clearly being directed by porn director Danny Steinman. The movie cared more about the sex scenes than about the actors. With that being the priority, there were so many gratuitous shots of nudity and evident scenes of actors visibly thinking about what they're about to say, then seeing them mentally just say fuck it.
Don't you come near me, Sheriff, I warn you. I got a bomb on me.
Now, it did help them create unique characters and lines, but it doesn't redeem itself for the carelessness for the direction or writing, especially in the final act. During it, we finally see Jason, but he doesn't look scary at all, especially since Jason isn't really Jason. Instead, Jason is just some random character who we only see in 2 scenes, and he is wearing a basic looking Jason costume. But the fact that Jason isn't the killer doesn't bother me, it's the motive that does. He's killing people because he wants revenge for the murder of his annoying son Joey. Yet from the looks of it, somehow no one knew they were related. Like, the twist was so stupid, not even mentioning the new killer that leads to nothing ending. This movie as a whole is such a sleazy slasher that has some decent side characters but terrible directing and overall screenplay. For my number 11 spot, I was going to have to go to the original Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, although an iconic horror movie, is not a very well made one. For the most part, it's a movie that is filled with boring dialogue and mostly boring scenes. Not even likable characters can save this movie, because they're still very forgettable. Wait, I'm starting to sense a pattern. This franchise started with a whodunit slasher, but unlike every good whodunit, you have never even met the killer before the reveal, which sucks because Betsy Palmer does an amazing job as Pamela Voorhees. The whole point of her character is for her to be a shocking reveal, but the issue is that we never meet her beforehand, nor do we ever get information or a reference about Jason. An important backstory of the camp that would have been nice to know before the ending. What's even worse is that there's also a good amount of plot holes. Like, if Pamela is already at Crystal Lake, why did she leave and pick up Annie first? Why not kill the kids at the camp first? Also, how did Pamela manage to throw a whole teenage girl through a window and then all of a sudden be decently far away in her Jeep? Speaking of which, we never know what happened to Steve's Jeep, the main thing that would have saved them. It just disappears from the movie. We also know what the killer's Jeep looks like, which takes away from the killer reveal even more, since we clearly see the green color of it at the very end, even if we've never seen Pamela. So yeah, for the most part, the way they tried to make this movie a whodunit is what sucks the most about it, though I did somewhat enjoy certain aspects of this movie. First off, with the camp and forest setting mixed with the loud rain, is the first horror movie that I've seen that takes place in the middle of the forest, giving me relatable, relaxed camping vibes. One thing I'm iffy about though is the not talked about as much few big things that they semi-copied from another iconic horror movie. Not Halloween, but Psycho. There's a similar score, antagonist, motive, a fake out final girl, and attractiveness or sex equals death, but did manage to still feel like its own story. The gore and makeup effects are also very innovative due to the works of Tom Savini. There are also some decent storytelling choices, like playing the score to represent the killer's POV, and having a gentle calming score at the end with the beautiful visuals to really make the jump scare effective. Plus, it has a decent mysterious ending. In conclusion, Friday the 13th is a pretty boring whodunit slasher that has forgettable characters and an unsatisfying reveal, but does still manage to have an innovative gore, an iconic score, and the greatest performance of the franchise, Betsy Palmer as Pamela Voorhees. At the bottom of my top 10 Friday movies is Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. There's a lot of huge issues with this movie, but some good things in it too. First of all, Jason in an all black slimy outfit looks great on him, especially in the middle of Times Square. Second, the soundtrack is pretty good due to the 80s like rock and disco music. Plus, the side characters are pretty good, which is rare, and the kills to me are okay even if they're heavily censored. When done on screen, we get Julius's decapitation, and Charles is personally terrifying but well-deserved drowning. And when off-screen, we get to see Jason kill with a variety of weapons like glass shards, an electric guitar, and a fire axe. Also, even in a badly written and set movie, a lot of scenes still manage to be somewhat entertaining. Lastly, many scenes are visually appealing due to their use of colors coming from the lights in the boat's bridge, ballroom, and the few minutes we get in Times Square. Speaking of which, as I said, there are many problems in this movie. The biggest is the lie that the title gives us. Jason is on a boat to New York for a whole hour. After that, he's in random New York alleyways for 20 minutes before ever getting to Manhattan. Then, when he gets there, Jason only takes Manhattan for about only a good 5 minutes. There's also a huge plot hole involving Jason being on the cruise in the first place. The fact that the boat from Crystal Lake somehow managed to get to a dock that leads to an ocean is unbelievably stupid. We also see him in many hallucinations from Rennie, the final girl. In the hallucinations, Jason constantly has different looks and makeup effects on him. Like, just pick a look and stick with it. Not to mention, a somewhat decent character dies randomly and stupidly. To escape Jason, a girl named Kelly runs into the party room, and when she does, as a mentally stable and sober teenager, she begins to look and spin in circles as if she was confused about where she was. Also, I get that Jason can somewhat teleport, but this movie has him using that ability way too much in such ridiculous ways, especially in this scene.
It's not possible.
Also, the two protagonists are probably the most boring characters in this movie. Not boring though is Rennie's dickhead uncle. The dude is never not an asshole, and as we learn more about him and Rennie's past, it becomes clearer and clearer how much of a piece of shit he is. Lastly, the whole being in New York and not in Times Square part of this movie is the worst part, due to people constantly getting cornered in a populated city and randomly daily toxic sewer waste. Across the board, this movie is an absolute clickbait mess of a movie, but it's still more enjoyable to watch due to its either entertaining or super hateable side characters. Now, this is where the Friday movies go from mostly bad to just okay. It starts with my number 9 spot, Jason X. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of issues with this movie. First off, a major plot hole. No one ever checked up on Rowan and the other important looking people after their deaths. Her being saved only 400 years later is pretty ridiculous. Second, the whole Jason hunting part of this movie isn't great. It's filled with mostly boring scenes that don't even compare to Aliens. We also got to watch a robot and nerd romance that kind of feels weird. Now look, I understand that altogether this movie isn't well written, but still arguably one of the most entertaining in the franchise, mainly due to the entertaining characters and their 90s Williamson-like dialogue.
What's going on? Why aren't you on board?
Kinsa won't open the door. I think that she's finally lost it, and this is a really bad time for this!
We also get Sergeant Brodsky, probably the second most badass character of the entire franchise, and is soon named Janessa. She's my favorite of the victims in Jason X due to her being funny and many snarky comments.
How does he function with a brain that small?
Way manages.
And she's not only the funny thing in this movie. Most of the campy and cheesy humor works because it can be so cheesy that they feel like dad jokes. So bad that you can't help but just laugh a little bit. Plus, final girl Rowan. She's a smart, capable person that gives us some nice time-based dialogue between Rowan and the other characters. Jason also hilariously gets alarmed through the moaning of teens and immediately gives us the best kill of the franchise, the amazing bloody and frozen face slam. Logically, he then gets his ass handed to him due to the future tech and understandably needs and gets an upgrade as Uber Jason. He manages to be threatening even though he kind of looks like a Power Rangers villain. Plus, the Camp Crystal Lake diversion was a funny scene where we get to see a return of a great kill, the sleeping bag tree slam. Even if this movie is badly written, the character still brings this movie up a notch by succeeding in making the movie funny and entertaining. Plus, like I said, I respect the movie a bit more if it at least tries to be different, and although not great, it's exactly what Jason X attempted to do, which is why it managed to earn itself a 7 out of 10. Okay, now this is the ranking that I expect most people to disagree with me on. If you've seen all the Friday movies, you knew that this movie was coming. But my pick for number 8 has to be Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. Yes, this movie is the weirdest and most random addition to the franchise by far, but this is also the most unique and best acted Friday movie. Instead of us having to follow forgettable horny teens for the 8th time, we instead get to watch a protagonist named Steven, who's secretly a badass. He cares very much about his family and is willing to do anything possible to protect them. Plus, he's not even the best character in this movie. We get a legit bounty hunter in the form of the absolute lunatic, Creighton Duke. The fact that he's willing to attack Jason is so outrageous and makes him that much cooler of a character. He's also the person that gives us the new mythology, which is an entertaining way to tell all of us. We even get some great side characters like Eric Pope, the funny shit-talking coroner, and the amusing New Jersey-sounding workers of the diner. Altogether, they help give an emotional connection to the movie that has only ever happened in 2 other movies. There are also some good scenes like the explosive intro, every diner scene, and the awesome Freddy cameo. Plus, the makeup effects are back to being great, giving us kills like the tent kill and an absolutely disgusting melting corpse. Additionally, because of the great makeup effects, Jason also looks a bit more infected and inflamed due to them choosing to go for realism, which I do respect. Unfortunately though, I do still have some major problems with him. He's the most vocal that he's ever been and even acts normally at the end of the movie.
Get the hell away from her, Ed!
Plus, for some reason, after 8 movies, they decided to give Jason some actual lore. He somehow has a sibling, and supposedly so Jason can live, he needs to possess a Voorhees' body that can either be dead or alive, which is a major plot hole in this movie. If Jason needs any type of Voorhees' body, why didn't he just go back to the house and possess Debbie once she was already dead? Or kill Jessica when he had a chance and then possess her afterwards? Better yet, he's never even done this before, so like how the hell did Jason even know about this in the first place? Also, how did he manage to go back to Crystal Lake? Just like Manhattan, Jason Goes to Hell is a movie with an unusual, inexplicable mess of a script, but at least manages to be entertaining, has great characters, and be the most unique. A definitive 7 out of 10. An overall mediocre movie. For my number 7 pick, I have Friday the 13th Part 2. Now look, I understand that this movie is the introduction of Jason Voorhees, but other than that, this movie is pretty average, but still much better than the original that came before it. One reason is the addition of more interesting characters. These characters are actually memorable and distinctive people, plus they're also more entertaining. Their likability makes you care whether they die or not, which is great because the majority of the victims in this franchise are very forgettable. My 2 favorite characters are Vicky and Mark. Their flirting and relationship in general are heartwarming and are much nicer compared to the overly horny flirting in the rest of this franchise.
What do you want to play for?
Position.
And Alice is cool and all, but Ginny is a way better final girl. She manages to intelligently trick Jason in a super risky way. It's such a great scene that it became an important element in both the game and the Friday the 13th remake. Friday the 13th Part 2 is also better with its humor and overall direction. The seeing Jason running towards the shack shot is probably my favorite shot of the franchise. It's a simple but super effective oh shit moment. And although this movie is better directed, produced, and written, it's not without its flaws. The movie starts with Alice's flashback dreams that go on for an entire 5 minutes. Way too long of a scene that ends up not being important, since Alice gets killed off anyways. Plus, the POV shots aren't as clear at representing the killer. Another thing that isn't as good is that due to the MPAA and Tom Savini's departure, the kills don't look as good. While the franchise is known for its many kills and innovative 80s gore, Part 2 is not very creative. Another thing that isn't good is that Jason isn't that threatening in this movie. Jason not speaking but still grunting just doesn't make him scary. He looks goofy and didn't seem as threatening as his old dead mom, especially when he let someone live. It was such a letdown. In general, Friday the 13th Part 2 is a well-directed and produced slasher that is somewhat entertaining and filled with likable characters, but also has a poor introduction of a horror icon, unimpressive makeup effects, and an unoriginal story. This movie feels right with a 7.5 out of 10. Better than most average horror movies, but still average. Here's where we meet the great part of the franchise. All the movies from here on out are all movies that I find to be very good, and it's also my pick for number 6, Vincent DeSantis' second Jason film, Never Hike in the Snow. We get to see a lot of Jason, and he's even there from the get-go, giving a pretty quick and brutal kill. It's done with some good special effects that look even better when the vivid red blood contrasts with the bright white snow. You also get the return of some great past characters. First off, Tom Matthews returns as Tommy Jarvis. He was previously just a cameo in the previous film, but this time he's an actual main character, which is great. Also returning is the now promoted Sheriff Rick Cologne. When we first met him, he was kind of a wacky, but is now more serious.
Wherever the red dot goes, you bang.
Freeze it, psycho! You're making a big mistake, Sheriff. Cuff him.
We watch as he tries to calm down his fellow officers, a victim's parent, and of course Tommy. All of them give some actual decent performances, plus directing and cinematography wise, this movie for the most part is great. It has some nice transitions, Friday references, and a great building of suspense. However, this movie is just number 6 because compared to DeSantis' last Jason film, it isn't as visually stunning. It's visually dark due to it being set at night for the majority of the movie, which completely takes away from the whole point of having a bright snowy setting in the first place. So yeah, Never Hike in the Snow is still overall a great movie, but does get some points deducted for not being as visually amazing as it could have been. Clearly an 8 out of 10. Now let's go to my top 5 favorite Friday the 13th movies. Starting my top 5 is the horror collab of the century, Freddy vs. Jason. We get a mix of nightmare-like teens trying to stay awake and survive the constant massacres Jason's inflicting. Both the nightmare and Jason creeping up on people scenes are both well done and feel true to the separate franchises. We even get a quick, clear Nightmare franchise recap for the people that haven't seen the movies through an interesting narration by Freddy. He also perfectly explains the premise that also actually makes sense. Freddy is powerless now that people forgot about him, and to restore his power, he resurrects Jason to scare people and give them nightmares to remind them of Freddy. Plus, other than Jason and Freddy, there's some okay acting and sufficient special effects for the gore. And although the characters are basic and superficial, their dialogue makes them usually entertaining. However, Brendan Fletcher as Mark gives it his all, and is probably my favorite victim of this movie. Plus, the showdown between the killers is easily the best part of this movie. During the fights, the stonework is amazing. They know how to switch from using CGI and practical effects, like the gratuitous amount of blood that is exactly what I hope to see. Lastly, the constant visual use of colors help give an appealing look to the movie. Still though, this movie does have faults in a few things, mainly due to the year it was made. It being made in 2003 makes this movie filled with choppy slow-mo, hits that make people fly, and as I said, basic characters with basic characteristics. Another major issue I had was Jason's droopy eye and stiff posture. They make him one of the least threatening looking Jasons, even if his outfit doesn't look that bad. Finally, the most stupid issue I have with this movie is the fact that Jason is scared of water and Freddy fire. I can somehow see how Freddy could be scared of fire, but Jason being scared of water is so inaccurate. Jason has spent so much time in water, and to see him all of a sudden scared of it in one of the last movies is ridiculous. Although it's only important in one scene, so at least it's only a minor issue. Freddy vs. Jason is just a super entertaining brawl of a horror movie with a lot of gore and a clever premise that manages to be good even with some pretty major Jason and production issues. An all-around movie that earns a great 8 out of 10. Coming in at number 4 is the 4th movie, Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. At the beginning of this franchise, we constantly follow horny teens as they get killed by Jason. And even though these characters are easily the horniest teens of the franchise, they're also one of the most believable to be friends. They're all pretty good and entertaining as a whole, especially Crispin Glover's character. I don't care what anybody says, he's literally playing George McFly 5 years before he actually does. Like, come on, look how awkward he is. Also, some of the characters die after seeing them sad for understandable reasons, which actually did make me feel bad when they died, especially Terry. She did get a visually cool kill though. Tom Savini also returned to do the special effects. Because of him, he gives us some deaths that are actually pretty gnarly. He's also the reason why Jason and his death look so good. He's also a lot quicker and sneakier, making him feel more dangerous and an all-around bigger threat to the best part of this movie, the true protagonist, the Jarvis family. We get the introduction of the best and most popular character of this franchise, Tommy Jarvis. Here, he's just a kid who makes some pretty dope masks, probably a referential celebration of Savini coming back. His sister and mom really seem to love each other, which makes me care very much about them. Though the main issues I have with this movie are in the final act. Like I said before, I like the family dynamic in this movie, but the amount of stupid decisions made by the sister Trish Jarvis is so annoying to watch. If there's a potential killer on the loose, don't just leave your younger sibling alone. Also, why run back down the stairs when someone was clearly dying? And the fuck is this blocked video game exit bullshit? Lastly, Tommy stays for that long and doesn't choose to escape. He instead cuts his shaved head and gives us a wannabe Ginny distraction. Like, I think Tommy's great, but there's no way that idea was Tommy's first or even the best idea. So yeah, I think this movie is a great time, but due to the constant stupid decisions made in the ending, I just can't put this movie higher in my ranking, or give it a higher rating than an 8 out of 10. Earning the bronze medal in my ranking is the latest official Friday movie, the Friday 13th remake in 2009. This remake is basically a connected best of version of the first 4 movies, and according to my ranking, it's also better than all of them. Just like the rest of the franchise, the characters are once again mostly horny people.
You wanna slap that ass one more time for Daddy?
Daddy like that?
Yeah, Daddy does like it. Daddy likes it a lot.
However, no one is boring. Whether being super caring, decently likable, weird, or an overall over-the-top dick of a character, almost everyone gives a fun, decent performance that makes this movie very enjoyable to watch, especially our 3 main protagonists. Good-looking Karen Clay, his sister Whitney, and Danielle Panna Baker as Jenna, my favorite character of this movie. She and Clay have some good romantic chemistry that feels very genuine, unlike the one we're forced to care about in The New Blood. Clay being a person who's worried about his sister makes you feel bad for him instantly. The more we watch him, the more likable he starts getting, especially when we see him try his best to keep calm as he gets disrespected multiple times.
Are you gonna buy something? I mean, you've been up here for quite a while yapping.
Though to me, the best part of this movie is the new version of Jason Voorhees. Instead of a somewhat childlike Jason or zombie Jason, we get my favorite version of him, realistic, survivalist Jason. Due to Jason being a survivalist, too strategic, fast, and brutal, he's easily the most realistic Jason, which in turn makes him the most terrifying. Plus, due to being made in the late 2000s, of course, gore became a more important and better looking element in horror movies, and this movie doesn't disappoint. We get an axe to the head, chest impalement, and a very slow stab through the neck with a screwdriver. However, my favorite isn't gory, but is personally the most terrifying. Death by fire, while being in a closed hanging sleeping bag. This movie is so entertaining, but does have issues in the form of characters, who are either forgettable or only memorable for their horniness and nudity. And the ending could have been a happy ending, but instead was a Friday the 13th jump out of the lake ending, which I understand this is a remake after all, but at the same time, Jason is a human and was so obviously killed. So to just do that feels forced and unsatisfying. The 2009 Friday the 13th remake as a whole is a very enjoyable and entertaining movie to watch, with some unnecessary characters and ultimately an unsatisfying ending, rightfully deserving of an 8.5 out of 10. In second place for my Friday ranking is the first incredible Vincent DeSanti fan film, Never Hike Alone. From the start, the shot of the opening credits mixed with the score gives us a genuinely creepy feeling that was never really there for me in this franchise. It's also the most beautiful looking Friday movie. It even gives me the best and most genuine camping vibes of the entire franchise, which is a huge personal bonus. Our main protagonist Kyle is also a very likable funny guy, who's pretty realistic and someone I quickly find myself caring for. His realistic dialogue and behavior easily makes him one of the most likable characters of the franchise.
You need to assemble, you need to be strong. Here we go. Let's sell this fucker. Hey, what's up, trail junkies? This week, fuck me!
There's also some great fan service in the form of some cool references to the original Friday. Plus, tone-wise, the silent, eerie setting makes the movie feel suspenseful, which has also never been done beforehand in the franchise. Even Jason looks good. Like, yeah, it's very clearly a Jason costume, but the way DeSanti shoots his scenes and makes Jason walk fast with loud footsteps is so terrifying. Also, the makeup effects are great. Combined with the nasty sound design, it helps make the wounds feel real. Then, Tom Matthews makes his return as Tommy Jarvis after 30 years. And by the way, just to be extra clear and give even more respect to DeSanti, this is a fan film that was well directed, written, produced, and acted. Like, other than the minor issues of sometimes not having dialogue and not having good kills, this movie is still great as both a fan film or just an all-around movie that definitely deserves a 9 out of 10. Finally, my all-time #1 favorite Friday the 13th movie is Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. Our protagonist is once again Tommy Jarvis, and he's in his primal form, no longer just a kid or a randomly crazy fighting teen. Tommy is now a mentally stable and selfless badass who will do anything to save others. Plus, other than Tommy, we get characters that are all either likable and realistic or entertaining to watch. The secondary protagonist, Megan, is a final girl who isn't as innocent and openly vulnerable as other final girls. And the people she cares about are a great addition to this movie as well. Her counselor friends and her dad, Sheriff Michael Garris. The friends friends are all entertaining people who seem like genuine friends, and for once the police officer character in an 80s slasher isn't dumb nor a dick for no reason. Instead, the sheriff doesn't take anyone's BS and truly cares about his daughter. He also gives an entertaining dynamic with Tommy due to understandably not believing him about Jason. The setting is also a huge plus. We go back to a summer camp rather than teens just going to cabins, which isn't much different, but because of it, we get some good scenes of some pretty funny kids. There's also humor in this movie that actually does work for me most of the time. It isn't that cheesy and got some genuine chuckles for me.
I think I'd rather deal with old Jason.
Another great thing about this movie is that it introduced us to zombie Jason. He gets resurrected in a way that through movie logic makes sense. Jason is also much more terrifying due to his constant eye holes being pitch black, being completely mute, and no longer being mortal, meaning he's much stronger and doesn't really feel pain, which is kind of funny to see since over time you actually see Jason realize how powerful he's become. Speaking of seeing Jason, we get to see him a lot more compared to the past movies, which is a huge upgrade. We also lose much of the sexually gratuitous presence of the previous films. There was no nudity nor super horny teens in this movie, which was such a relief. I would also say that the set of kills as a whole are the best in the franchise. The same goes for the direction, cinematography, and writing. The only real issue I had with this movie was the fact that in 6 years, the kids should still know that Camp Forest Green is Camp Crystal Lake, yet somehow they don't. I also understand that the sheriff can see why the killer could have been Tommy, but how is a wrecked RV being flipped over and filled with dead bodies Jason's MO? They didn't even find a mask or machete, so I don't know, those two things always felt weird to me. All around though, this is a great horror movie in general, not just compared to the other Friday the 13th movies. It's just a great fun to watch that rightfully earns itself a 9 out of 10. Now, after doing some math, I've concluded that with the movies that range from below average and great, altogether the Friday the 13th franchise as a whole gets a rating of a 7 out of 10. Thank you for watching this Ramos review and ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise. If you want me to rank another movie franchise, horror or not, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed these rankings and quick reviews, please leave a like and subscribe. It would help a lot and I would thoroughly appreciate it. Anyways, I'll talk to you in my next ranking.